8 scientists and researchers from OU and OSU have concluded that Oklahoma's A through F school grading system is flawed and the grades reflect randomness, chance, or error. That has added fuel to the firestorm of criticism of the system from various school administrators. But now, a researcher hired by State Superintendent of Public Instruction Janet Barresi and the Board of Education is disputing those findings, and the debate over A through F is firing up again.
Oklahoma lawmakers passed legislation creating an A through F grading system for Oklahoma public schools in 2011. To comply with the law, the Oklahoma State Department of Education adopted the evaluation formula championed by State Superintendent of Public Instruction Janet Barresi.
This school report gives everyone a clear and understandable grade on how our students are doing, and it is related to academics. And again, we urge parents to get together with their superintendents and to focus on the children. This isn't about adults and about how adults feel. This is about students.
Lloyd Snow is superintendent of Sand Springs Schools. He says the report cards are anything but clear and that he and many other school leaders are hearing a lot of criticism from parents who don't believe the results are fair or accurate.
Many parents across the state are asking their boards and their leaders questions about, can we opt out of all of these tests?
Snow says because there have been so many opt-out requests, a group of superintendents has made a formal request to the State Department of Education about how to respond to parents. If the opt-out is allowed, Snow believes entire schools would opt out.
In this district and in many districts, the tipping point has been hit. They would opt out immediately and quickly. No question in my mind.
Superintendent of Union Public Schools, Dr. Kurt Hartzler, says most teachers and parents at his schools don't believe the report cards.
What's ironic is that we have a national award-winning community school at Clark Elementary with an award-winning principal this year who was selected as one of the national recipients of the Principal of the Year. That school received a D.
8 scientists from OU and OSU worked together to research the methodology of the A through F grading formula. And for the first time, they recently made public their findings during a meeting attended by parents, educators, and a few lawmakers in Jenks. The researchers concluded the A through F formula was flawed and that the proficiency scores are scientifically indefensible measures of school performance.
It is hard to be able to sort out the effects of teachers in schools from the effects of numerous other factors that contribute to achievement, from how many hours a night a student might study, or their interest in reading, their motivation to come up to a beautiful science lab like this and engage in some experimental study.
Dr. Kurt Adams is the senior research scientist at the Oklahoma Center for Education Policy. He brought the research team's statistical analysis into terms a layperson could understand.
In our statistical models, the actual difference between A and B schools for raw scores comes down to less than half of a question. The actual difference between A and C schools with raw scores amounts to less than 2 questions. Between A and D, less than 5, A and F. Less than 4.
Adams says the current formula also allows for more affluent, higher achieving students to mask the scores of disadvantaged students.
So a letter grade actually hides the variance in achievement within schools, and it doesn't allow us to look to see how our more socially disadvantaged children are performing relative to our more affluent students.
Dr. Meredith McBee is Oklahoma's Assistant Superintendent for Accountability and Assessment. She says the State Department of Education believes the A through F formula is fine. Do you think that there needs to be any tweaking to the A through F grading system?
I think that we have the grading system for the base very, very it's a strong method right now.
The department asked researcher Dr. Megan Clifford to do her own analysis of the A through F formula. Clifford found some results contrary to the OU-OSU study using different calculations.
There's some calculations you can use to translate standard deviations into month of learning to make it more accessible to the public. And so when we did that, we found that the difference between an A school and an F school was actually about 1.5 years.
Clifford is employed with the State Department of Education and is completing a 2-year fellowship with the Center for Education Policy Research at Harvard. She sampled 200,000 students compared to the OU-OSU sample of 15,000. Clifford says the university's study sample size was too small and not representative.
They only had 5% of schools that were A's, and so that would translate to about 3 schools. And then on the other end, the F schools, there was 8% in their sample, and so that means about 5 schools. And so particularly generalizing on those ends, to when you only have 3 or 5 schools, that's difficult.
Union School Superintendent Dr. Kurt Hartzler says the OU-OSU sample size was scientifically sound, in line with national and internationally recognized models.
I have reviewed the study at least 4 times, and I can say without question that it is a very good and sound study. The methodology that they use, the analytical models that they use to look at the data and the different variables, to me, were very sound.
McBee says the department asked Clifford to eliminate controls for race and poverty when calculating the differences for A&F schools.
And so the assumptions that Megan started with is that we want to see how students are actually doing in the school. And the assumptions of OSU and OU researchers were, we don't want schools to be held accountable if there are things that are difficult about the students. So we want to make sure that the school isn't held accountable to have students score well if they are minority or poor or have some other mobility challenges.
Sand Springs Assistant Superintendent of Curriculum Instruction Sherry Durkee says poverty and performance must go hand in hand when making an evaluation.
If we can say poverty all day long and it sounds kind of blasé, but let's talk about the kid that really didn't have a house to go home to and is sleeping in their car and it is 28 degrees outside. Let's talk about that. Or the kid's family that, dad and mom just got arrested and they got taken by a DHS officer today. Let's talk about that. So to absolutely factor that out of the equation in regard to making having no effect is not appropriate.
The OU and OSU researchers also believe race and poverty are important factors and are concerned those measurements aren't reflected in the current letter grade. State Representative Lee Denny authored the A through F legislation.
It concerns me that this has turned out to be so punitive. When I started working on A through F 4 years ago, it was never meant to be punitive to schools. I think we have some wonderful schools and wonderful teachers.
So it sounds to me that you really do understand educators' and parents' distrust and or dismay of the findings.
Well, I certainly do. For instance, the grade school where my children went to school in Cushing did not receive a grade that I feel is adequate of the job that the teachers there do, and it's very distressing.
Denny has met with the OU-OSU researchers twice and now has serious questions about the A through F formula used by the State Department of Education.
It doesn't surprise me that the State Department would defend the formula because they designed it. And OSU and OU think we should totally scrap it. And so I think we've got to come down as politicians and legislators in the middle somewhere and look at all sides. I do not see us scrapping it.
But she does believe A through F needs work.
So you do anticipate legislation coming up in this next session?
Oh, I do. I think there'll be a lot. I don't mean to make light of it. I think there'll be lots of fixes. I think there'll be opportunities to delay it.
Denny says it's imperative that lawmakers get A through F right, not only for students, but for teachers whose job evaluations and pay will be dependent on student test scores in coming years.